In Bangladesh, a train crash killed 17 passengers.
Authorities say a freight train smashed into a passenger train traveling in the opposite direction. More details on this later in the news. Good evening, I am Gianna Llanes.
I am Nina Richie Alagao-Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Now for the headlines. PNP and Comelec ink a data sharing pact for the upcoming BSKE polls. The Philippines reaffirms its dedication to achieving sustainable development. France is providing air defense systems to Armenia amid its conflict with Azerbaijan. Israel claims Hamas is planning to deploy chemical weaponry. And Donald Trump files his candidacy for the United States presidential primary election. The Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, reminded employers of the proper payment of wages for the next week's upcoming holidays. Christina Aguirre reports.
The Department of Labor and Employment has issued an advisory specifying the wage computation for the upcoming special non-working holidays on October 30, November 1, and 2. Employees will receive compensation based on the following guidelines. If the employee did not work, the no work, no pay principle shall apply. This, however, is applicable unless there is a favorable company policy or collective bargaining agreement granting payment on a special day. Employees rendering work during the special holiday will receive an additional 30% of the basic wage on the first 8 hours of work. If an employee works on a special holiday that also falls on a rest day, the employer shall pay an additional 50% of the basic wage on the first 8 hours rendered. Meanwhile, Malacanang has no plans to declare October 31st as a holiday. Christina Aguirre for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Land Transportation Office, or LTO, announces that drivers whose licenses are set to expire in the next 3 months will likely have to use paper-based official receipts as temporary driver's licenses. This measure is due to a shortage of plastic cards, with only 1.9 million remaining, as a pending court case has delayed the delivery of the new cards. The supplier, All Card Incorporated, filed a lawsuit against the LTO, alleging that the agency showed favoritism to the winning bidder, Banner Plastic Card Incorporated, in the purchase contract for 5.2 million plastic cards. LTO Assistant Secretary Vigor Mendoza reveals that the agency is currently issuing around 30,000 licenses daily, with priority given to OFWs and other applicants who require licenses for work purposes. This allocation corresponds to about 600,000 licenses for October and an additional 1.3 million for November and December.
The Armed Forces of the Philippines, or AFP, assures the public that they will maintain peace and order during the Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections on the 30th of October. AFP Chief General Romeo Bronner Jr. reports that a 1,100-strong multi-agency task force will be deployed to secure the elections. This task force will consist of personnel from the AFP, the Philippine National Police, or PNP, the Philippine Coast Guard, or PCG, and the Department of Education. General Bronner emphasizes the importance of leaving behind political affiliations and personal interests among the task force members. Their primary objective is to create an environment where every Filipino can exercise their right to vote without fear or restriction.
The Philippine National Police joins forces with the Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, for the upcoming October 30 elections. JD Mahinay for the details.
The Philippine National Police, or PNP, and COMELEC signed a data-sharing pact to ensure the integrity and transparency of the 2023 Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections. The agreement grants COMELEC access to the PNP's election monitoring systems and subsystems, as well as outlined specific areas of cooperation seeking to boost the electoral process under Republic Act 10173 or the Data Privacy Act. This includes access to the PNP personnel deployment, voting center assistance, election status, candidates, party lists, and other critical data related to the barangay and youth polls. Meanwhile, PNP Chief General Benjamin Acorda Jr. urged the public to trust the electoral process. He added that the National Police will guarantee a secure and credible election this year. JD Mahinay reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Officials of the Commission on Elections or COMELEC are set to visit Abra Province on Thursday after almost 250 candidates withdrew their candidacies for the 2023 Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections. Reports say the candidates backed out allegedly because they were advised by their elders. COMELEC Chairman George Garcia.
Gusto natin alamin ano ang tunay na nangyayari at pangyayari dyan sa Abra sapagkat ang report sa ating kahapon ng Regional Director kasama mismo si Chief PNP na wala namang pananakot at yung mga sinasabing pag-withdraw ng almost 250 candidates ay dahil sa pakiusap ng mga nakatatanda nila o yung elders na tinatawag.
COMELEC Chairman George Garcia also said Executive Director Teofisto Elnas Jr. and Deputy Executive Director for Operations Rafael Olaño will look into the situation in the province in his stead. Garcia also clarified that based on the assessment of the PNP, the candidates were not threatened by other people. Data from the COMELEC shows 361 incidents of election-related violence.
Alam niyo po, nakakabagabag yung ganyang klaseng mga insidente, lalo pat hindi naman nasasaktan lang kung hindi may mga namamatay tayong mga kababayan. Ang pagtakbo ay hindi dapat kadahilanan upang may magbuwis ng buhay. Ang pagtakbo ay nag-o-offer ka ng serbisyo mo sa ating po mga kababayan. Pero yung ikaw ay kukuhanan ng buhay, hindi po yung katanggap-tanggap at hindi ka patapatawad po yan.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. reaffirms the government's commitment to advancing the capabilities of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, or AFP, to transform it into a world-class force. He made this pledge during a speech delivered at the traditional dinner for the AFP Council, or Sergeants Major at Malacanang Palace. The president encouraged military personnel to maintain their dedication and assured them of his administration's unwavering support. He commended their efforts in strengthening the bonds between AFP officials and the troops, highlighting their role in safeguarding the nation's freedom and security. Additionally, President Marcos expressed confidence that the Sergeants Major would continue to acquire new skills and enhance their competence, contributing to the fulfillment of the AFP's objectives.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has approved the proposal creating a coordinating council for the universal healthcare law in the country. Health Chief Ted Herbosa said the Department of Health will chair the council while the Department of Interior and Local Governments, or DILG, will serve as its co-chair. Herbosa stressed that the President instructed the DILG to expedite the review of Executive Order Number 138 on the implementation of the Supreme Court ruling on the Mandanas-Garcia petitions. This is to incorporate the universal healthcare financing reforms in the amendments. The health chief said that 71 local government units have committed to integrating their local health systems. The universal healthcare law aims to ensure all citizens are entitled to healthcare benefits, including comprehensive outpatient services.
The Philippines officially signed a new cooperation framework with the United Nations for 2024 to 2028, underscoring the country's dedication to achieving sustainable development. Natalie Pichi tells us more.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. presided over the signing of the 2024 to 2028 United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, or UNSDCF, in a ceremony at Malacanang Palace. The UNSDCF is a collaborative strategic framework designed to support the national development priorities aligned with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. President Marcos emphasized that this framework will strengthen and expand the partnership between the Philippines and the United Nations. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals aim at improving health and education, reducing inequality, stimulating global economic growth, addressing climate change, and safeguarding the environment. Natalie Pichi reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Japanese Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or JCCI, acknowledges the efforts of the Marcos administration in turning the Philippines into an attractive investment destination. This recognition was conveyed during a courtesy call to President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. at Malacanang Palace. During the meeting, JCCI Chairperson Ken Kobayashi expressed that Japanese companies are interested in strengthening their partnership with the Philippines. He mentioned that the Philippines is the first country the organization visited as it resumes its economic missions. President Marcos responded by discussing opportunities for further economic development and identified areas of collaboration between the two nations. He also recognized Japan's continued assistance to the Philippines, particularly in infrastructure development.
The Department of Foreign Affairs, or DFA, said 20 Filipinos in the West Bank desire to return to the Philippines amid escalating armed conflict between Israel and the Hamas militant group. DFA recorded at least 122 Filipinos residing in the West Bank. The agency, however, did not provide other details, including the repatriation schedule. DFA has raised crisis alert level 2 over West Bank. Meanwhile, the Philippine Embassy in Jordan has assured that 136 Filipinos in Gaza affected by the war have remained safe and accounted for. The embassy noted that the Filipinos are now waiting to be repatriated. Coming up, Turkey submits bill for NATO's accession of Sweden. More trucks carrying humanitarian aid enter Gaza. And Donald Trump files for New Hampshire presidential primaries. Stay tuned, Mata ng Agila International will return for more global news.
Yan! Ako po si Ninyo Mulak. Abangan niyo po, this Saturday, magluluto po kami ng Sandy's Roast Lemon Chicken. At syempre, ang aming Chairman's Glazed Pork Belly. Lengua with mushroom sauce. And last but not least, ang slow-cooked beef stew. Every Saturday, 11 a.m. dito po sa Net 25. Right? See you!
Panoorin nyo kami at mag-i-enjoy kayong tunay dahil kahit mali ang sagot mo, pwede kang manalo.
Please welcome our Tara Gamers, the Pedicab Drivers!
Kunyari, ako sumakay, si Diana.
Sa akin, libre yan.
Yay!
Wow! Ikaw, Niki, kunyari, si Amiga, at yung pasahero mo.
Sisingilin ko pa rin po.
Yeah! Anong city ang kilala bilang pinakamatandang syudad sa Pilipinas?
A po.
Bakit mo sabi vegan? Because that's where it all began. And this is Tara Game!
Agad!
Level up!
Sa buhay, minsan lang dumating ang taong masasabi mong tunay na kaibigan.
Yep! At kapag siya'y natagpuan na, huwag mo nang pakawalan.
Ang tunay na kaibigan, laging nandyan kahit kailan.
Handang gawin ang lahat. Maging happy ka lang.
Gagawin ang Afro Frank! Para sa'yo, para
lang ng inyong mga bagong kaibigan.
Tuwing umaga,
Love
Tony Pet
and everything!
Lunes hanggang Biyernes,
6:30 ng umaga
sa Net 25! Let's not get there! Love Tony Pet and everything! Love Tony Pet and
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is set to visit the United States later this week. This is part of the two nations' ongoing effort to mend ties amid growing geopolitical crises. Officials said the Chinese top diplomat will visit Washington from October 26 until October 28 and meet U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Sources say the meeting is likely to cover a wide range of issues, including the Israel-Hamas conflict, the Russia-Ukraine war, and the rising tension in the South China Sea.
Chinese leader Xi Jinping has issued a decree removing Li Shangfu as China's Minister of Defense. Li, who became a defense minister during a cabinet reshuffle in March, has not been seen since giving a speech on August 29. Reports say Li was under investigation for corruption related to equipment procurement and development. Xi's decree also stripped King Gang of his state councillor position on Tuesday. China's top legislators did not explain the removal of Li and Qin.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has fulfilled his commitment made during the NATO summit in July of this year by submitting the bill for Sweden's NATO membership to Parliament. While the bill's passage is considered a formality, President Erdogan had delayed it as a means to negotiate concessions from the United States, including the sale of F-16s to Ankara. Turkey also sought tighter extradition measures from Sweden concerning Kurdish asylum seekers residing in their country. With this bill now being advanced, the Turkish government has taken a significant step towards officially endorsing Sweden's NATO membership. The only remaining approval required is from fellow EU member Hungary, which is similarly dragging out the endorsement.
The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs accuses 4 European nations of illegally holding fertilizers at their ports. This situation has resulted in underdeveloped countries like Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Sri Lanka, and others being deprived of humanitarian food supplies. RT's Omaima Ichchar has the details.
Russia expects that the countries illegally holding our fertilizers will make all necessary efforts to send them to the poorest countries in a timely, humanitarian manner. Only 2 deliveries were completed. The dispatch of 3 other shipments to Nigeria, Zimbabwe, and Sri Lanka is stalled, despite the completion of all preparatory procedures. This situation is another clear illustration of the hypocrisy of Western countries, which in words declare the non-proliferation of illegal, unilateral sanctions on Russian fertilizers and food, but in fact block even purely humanitarian, gratuitous supplies.
Moscow expects countries that are illegally holding Russian fertilizers to make efforts to send them to the countries that they were intended to be sent to. Now, last year, Moscow took the initiative to send 262,000 tons of mineral fertilizers that are blocked to the countries in the global south. However, they're still blocked in countries like Latvia, Estonia, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Since the initiative, only 2 shipments have been made, one to Malawi and the other to Kenya. Now, as for the rest that were supposed to be sent to Nigeria, Zimbabwe, or Sri Lanka, they are still stalling despite the fact that all the necessary procedures have been taken. In Latvian, Estonian, and Belgian ports, there are still over 96,000 tons that are intended to be transferred but are still being held up there. Now, the Russian Foreign Ministry also noted that these deliveries face several other obstacles, including significant taxes as well as fees for other logistical services. Moreover, the former Latvian Foreign Minister, now the President of Latvia, has previously announced that the Latvian authorities are ready to deliver these products to the countries of the global south.
A shipment of Russian mineral fertilizers subject to the European Union sanctions departed Riga port. The World Food Programme is planning to deliver more shipments of mineral fertilizers under the Western sanctions from Latvia in order to provide support to countries that need those products most.
Now, despite that statement, the products have been stuck in Latvian ports for over 18 months because of sanctions. In general, the Russian Foreign Ministry noted that Brussels, London, and Washington must either tie things up with words about the non-extension of these illegal sanctions on Russian agricultural products, or simply stop lying to consumers from the global south who have to bear the burden of all of this.
The French government has announced its intention to provide air defense systems to Armenia amidst escalating tensions with Azerbaijan. This announcement comes in the wake of Azerbaijan's victory after a swift military offensive in Nagorno-Karabakh. France, which hosts Europe's largest Armenian refugee community, is concerned about the potential for a renewed attack by the Azerbaijani military on Armenia. Paris has taken steps to enhance defense cooperation with Yerevan after an announcement that Armenia will establish more independence from Russia after the Karabakh incident. More trucks carrying humanitarian aid enter Gaza as the demand for food, medical supplies, and fuel remains high at the war-torn Palestinian enclave. Jeff Sanidad tells us more.
Trucks loaded with humanitarian aid leave the Rafah border crossing into the Gaza Strip on Monday. This after alarm has surged about the spiraling humanitarian crisis in Gaza after the war sparked by the October 7 Hamas attack. Thousands of buildings have been destroyed and more than 1 million people displaced in the besieged Gaza Strip. The Hamas-controlled Palestinian enclave is now largely deprived of water, food, and other basic supplies. Meanwhile, food from humanitarian aid that arrived from Egypt over the weekend is being cooked and distributed to displaced people at the UNRWA school in Rafah. Rafah is located south of the Gaza Strip. Volunteers say they prepare food every day and distributed it in evacuation centers. They provide rice with meat and cover more than 7 schools. They say the food comes from donations from those living inside and outside the country. To cook the food, they are left with using fire from burning wood because of the gas shortage. Meanwhile, Israel is determined to crush Hamas, but has said little about what would replace its rule in Gaza after the war. As Israel's military steps up strikes in preparation for a wildly expected ground offensive, spokesman Elon Levy says the Gaza Strip will not be ruled by Hamas once the war is over. Jeff Sanidad for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Israel's President Isaac Herzog reveals that Hamas had plans to use cyanide agents against Israeli civilians. In an interview, Herzog details the instructions recovered from a USB drive on the body of a slain Hamas member. RT correspondent Maria Finoshina reports.
It's Al-Qaeda material, official Al-Qaeda material. We're dealing with ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Hamas. This is what we're dealing with. It speaks about various chemicals that come out and produce chemical weapons. Simple as that.
While many are questioning the validity of the document, and Sky News noted they couldn't verify what was presented, the rhetoric coming from Israel right now is sounding very similar to the language used by the U.S. in the aftermath of 9/11. The threat of another group or government using chemical weapons has often been lobbied by the United States, especially when the George W. Bush administration accused Saddam Hussein of doing just that in Iraq more than 20 years ago. But this isn't the first first time Israel has invoked language used by the U.S. In fact, they were quick to label the initial attack by Hamas as Israel's 9/11, drawing a comparison between the 7th of October and the notorious attacks in the U.S. that led to the so-called War on Terror.
Hamas waged war on Israel yesterday with an unprovoked attack on civilians. They fired thousands of rockets at Israeli-populated centers, and then they breached the border fence and sent in hundreds of armed terrorists infiltrated almost all the border towns. This is unimaginable. This is, someone said, our 9/11. This is war, and we have to consider it as a war.
And it doesn't stop there. A few months after the 9/11 attacks in the U.S., then President Bush gave a speech in which he warned about the danger of what he called the axis of evil. He listed North Korea, Iran, and Iraq, 3 countries Washington accused of harboring, financing, and aiding terrorists. That label was revived once again last week by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as he warned about a new axis comprised of Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas.
This is part of an axis of evil of Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas. Their open goal, is to eradicate the state of Israel. The open goal of Hamas is to kill as many Jews as they could, and the only difference is they would have killed every last one of us, murdered every last one of us, if they could.
Given that Israel is invoking the language used by the U.S. in the aftermath of 9/11, it seems to be fitting that when President Biden visited Tel Aviv last week, he warned Israel to avoid repeating the mistakes the U.S. made in its response to 9/11.
Justice must be done. But I caution this: while you feel that rage, don't be consumed by it. After 9/11, we were enraged in the United States. While we sought justice and got justice, we also made mistakes.
While Biden didn't elaborate on what exactly those mistakes were, we are left to question whether they included the ground invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan that resulted in 2 decades of death, destruction, and war that has impacted millions of civilians. The claim of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq was used as a rallying cry by the Bush administration when it launched a full-scale invasion without approval from the UN Security Council. Israel's claim that Hamas is planning to use chemical weapons is already creating concerns that it will be used to drum up support for their expected ground invasion of Gaza, reminiscent of what the U.S. did 2 decades ago.
In France, Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne calls on Israel not to fall into the trap of Hamas. She urges Israel to provide a just response to what she says is terrorism following the attacks on October 7. Percy Parlade has the details.
During a debate in the French National Assembly, Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne says France is a friend of both Israel and the Palestinians. This after she says if terrorism must be fought, the response of democracies must be just. Borne says even in the toughest, most bitter battles, countries must never lose sight of what makes them democracies, from values to respect for the rule of law and international humanitarian law. The French Prime Minister says her country's friendship and solidarity with the Israeli people oblige them to make such an appeal. She says Israel must not fall into the Hamas trap. Borne notes how several thousand Palestinians have died in Gaza, many of whom are children. She mentions the situation of the 2 million inhabitants of Gaza, which is extremely serious. She says France has not forgotten the thousands of lives that have been cut short. Percival Parlade for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
A Pakistani court has indicted former Prime Minister Imran Khan for leaking state secrets. Khan's former deputy, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, has also been charged in the state secrets case. Pakistani law states that the charge of revealing state secrets carries a sentence ranging from life in prison to the death penalty. The state prosecution says Khan and Qureshi made public the contents of a diplomatic letter to allegedly show Khan's ouster was part of a conspiracy led by the United States and Pakistan's military. The Biden administration and Pakistan have denied Khan's claims. A spokesperson for Khan's party has vowed to challenge the court's findings. Khan, who led Pakistan from August 2018 to April 2022, was ousted by a no-confidence vote in parliament over allegations of economic mismanagement.
Economy Minister Sergio Massa produced a big surprise by finishing first in the opening round of Argentina's presidential election, reflecting voters' wariness about handing the presidency to his chief rival. This right-wing populist appended national politics and pledged to diminish the state drastically. Massa's victory over Javier Milei came despite the fact that on his watch inflation has surged into triple digits, eating away at the purchasing power of salaries and boosting poverty. With nearly all ballots counted, Massa had 36.7% of the vote, while Milei had 30%, meaning that the two are bound to head into a November 19 runoff. Massa has been a leading figure in the center-left administration in power since 2019. He successfully focused messaging on how Milei's proposals to slash the size of the state would affect everyday life for Argentinians. Milei, a self-described anarcho-capitalist who admires former U.S. President Donald Trump, built a groundswell of support while calling for the elimination of the central bank and replacement of the local currency with a U.S. dollar. Massa's campaign this year follows his unsuccessful campaign 8 years prior, where he finished a disappointing third place and was knocked out of the running. This time, he will have his shot in the runoff. The contest will determine whether Argentina will continue with a center-left administration or veer sharply to the right. He argued that Milei's plans could have devastating effects on social welfare programs, with the radical right-wing firebrand threatening the health, education, and social development ministries to be the first to be extinguished once he assumes office.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump was at New Hampshire State House to file the paperwork. This to put his name on the ballot for the state's presidential primary election. Mark Castillo has more.
Both supporters and critics of former President Donald Trump wait outside the State House in Concord. One Trump team volunteer says getting Trump back in is a must.
I pray that he wins. I think America, its respect and its status is collapsing right now under Joe Biden. I think he's a terrible president. I think he's in bed with China, taking the bribes and the Sun Hunter, all the stuff that's going on. And the American media is covering for it.
They just literally blocked off the
I'm sorry. I think if we're going to get our status back as, savior of the world, pretty much, we need to get Trump back in.
Meanwhile, for some, having Trump back in the race will be just another circus act. They say nobody is above the law.
I think, unfortunately, Donald Trump and the Republican Party in general have become an absolute circus, and Donald Trump is the leader of that circus, and it's just absolutely embarrassing. I think we've become the laughingstock of the world because of Donald Trump, and I felt like I should stand up and say that we don't support him. New Hampshire doesn't support him. We believe nobody is above the law, and given my monopoly sign, figured he should go directly to jail.
Trump's federal election conspiracy trial is due to open on March 4 in Washington. That is the day before one of the biggest events in the Republican primary calendar, the so-called Super Tuesday. This is when around 15 states hold their nominating votes. Trump also faces federal charges for alleged mishandling of classified documents after he left the White House. He has been charged with racketeering in Georgia for trying to overturn the 2020 election results in the southern state. Mark Castillo from Batandang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Up next, superfog causes highway pileup in the U.S. Gang-related crimes in Haiti hit a record high. And Mississippi River water levels hit an all-time low. Mata ng Agila International will be back after a short break. Don't go away.
Katuwang tungkol sa usaping ito.
Nasa puso dapat ng Pilipino to love what is Filipino.
Kaya dapat ihayag ng saloobin.
Kahit gaano kasi karami yung doktor natin, kung may bayad din, baliwala din.
Paano makakabili ang Pilipino ng bigas?
Himayin ang hinaing.
Gaano karaming pera bang kailangan mo para maging masaya ka?
Alamin ang pwedeng gawin.
So I think the lesson is, pag may fake news, i-correct ka agad ng people concerned.
Sagutin mo agad. Mag-reality check tayo.
Check yun.
Check.
Check na check.
Double check.
Check the check tayo dyan.
In Bangladesh, at least 17 people have been killed and 100 others injured after two trains collided. The crash occurred after one train entered the same lane as the other, smashing into a passenger train traveling in the opposite direction, causing the derailing of two passenger carriages. Initial reports suggest the freight train broke the signal, leading to the tragedy. 17 bodies have been recorded, with many injured taken to a hospital. Bangladesh authorities have ordered two investigations into the accident, and appeals have been made for volunteers to donate blood. Train accidents are common in Bangladesh, blamed mainly on unsupervised railway crossings, poor signaling, and bad track conditions. Meanwhile, in the southern U.S. state of Louisiana, a large cloud of fog enveloping a highway led to at least 158 car crashes and 7 deaths. The so-called super fog has led to a massive pileup on Interstate 55, about 30 miles outside of New Orleans. Images posted by the police showed both lanes of the highway bridge blocked off by the wreckage, which included dozens of charred vehicles. A fire had also erupted on the highway, with one vehicle appeared to have driven off the bridge and into the water below. More than 25 people were taken to the hospital, not counting the victims who sought medical assistance on their own. According to the National Weather Service, superfogs form when a mixture of smoke and moisture released from damp, smoldering organic material such as brush leaves and trees mixes with cooler, nearly saturated air.
In Mexico, 3 separate armed attacks killed 24 people, including a dozen of police officers. Mexican authorities said the first attack came with unidentified assailants targeting a security patrol in Guerrero State's municipality of Coyuca de Benitez. The state prosecutor's office said 13 people were killed while 2 were wounded. Another attack in the Michoacan left 4 civilians and a policeman dead. Authorities reported a group of gunmen attacked the brother of the mayor of the town of Tacambaro. Meanwhile, the last attack came Monday as a gunfight between alleged drug dealers in Puebla left 6 dead and 2 wounded. Mexico is plagued by cartel-related violence that has seen murdered more than 430,000 people since its government deployed the military in its war on drugs in 2016.
In Brazil, 1 student is dead and 3 others injured after a shooter opened fire in a school in Sao Paulo. EJ Gonzalez reports.
A shooter opened fire in a school in Sao Paulo, Brazil on Monday. Authorities confirmed that 1 student is dead and 3 others have been wounded. Media reports say the shooter, a teenage boy, opened fire at point-blank range. He killed a 15-year-old girl, 2 other students were shot and wounded. A third was injured while fleeing the attack. Police arrested the shooter, who is said to have attended the school in one of Sao Paulo's districts. The victims are being treated at a local hospital. Brazil has seen an increase in school attacks recently. Earlier this month, a former student stabbed 4 teenagers, killing one as they left school in the southeastern municipality of Brazil. In April, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's administration announced a series of measures to increase security at schools and tackle content seen as promoting school violence on social media. EJ Gonzalez from Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Costa Rican authorities have seized a total of 2,148 kilograms of cocaine headed to Belgium. Local officials said the drugs were hidden in a container at a port in Limon City on the Caribbean coast. Police said an investigation is underway to determine the origin of the drugs. Authorities are hoping to arrest additional suspects.
A United Nations envoy to Haiti warns that security in the impoverished Caribbean nation has collapsed further. She says the number of major crimes there are hitting record highs. Ken Cruz reports.
A report on Haiti from the UN Secretary General cites an increase in the number of indiscriminate killings, kidnappings, rapes, and attacks on several urban neighborhoods considered relatively safe until recently. UN envoy Maria Isabel Salvador tells the Security Council how ground security is deteriorating amid worsening gang violence. She says major crimes in the country are rising sharply to new record highs. The UN report says major crimes, including intentional homicides and kidnappings, surged at unprecedented rates, mostly in the West and Artibonite departments, home to the capital Port-au-Prince and the city of Gonaives. Between July 1st and September 30th, the National Police reported over 1,200 homicides, doubling the number during the same period in 2022. And between July and September, over 700 people were kidnapped. This is more than 200% during the same period in 2022. The UN is also concerned about killings perpetrated by vigilante groups that emerged last spring.
The layer of complexity added to the security crisis by the vigilante groups remains. Between 24 April and 30 September, BINU registered the lynching of at least 395 alleged gang members across all 10 departments of Haiti by the so-called Bois Calais vigilante movement.
As the violence from gangs controlling more than half of Port-au-Prince continued to escalate, the Security Council gave the go-ahead in early October for the deployment of the non-UN multinational mission led by Kenya. This to help the overwhelmed Haitian police. Salvador says the expectations of millions of Haitians at home and abroad were raised by the Security Council's decision to greenlight the mission. She says a glimmer of hope was cast towards finally seeing a light at the end of the tunnel that is not an oncoming train. Ken Cruz from Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Sad news for animal lovers as the world's oldest dog, Bobby, has died at the age of 31. Bobby's death was announced by Dr. Karen Becker, a veterinarian who met Bobby several times. He passed away on October 20 in an animal hospital. Bobby is a purebred Rafeiro and was ordained the oldest dog by the Guinness Book of World Records on February 2, 2023. His grand old age was validated by the Portuguese government's pet database managed by the National Union of Veterinarians. Bobby was born on May 11, 1992, along with 3 other pups in a wood storage shed owned by the Costa family in the village of Conqueiros in Portugal.
For the second straight year, water levels in the Mississippi River are drastically cascading down to another historic low this week. New data says the river's descent affects the cities of Memphis and Louisiana and its tributary, the Ohio River. The ebbing waters threaten barge traffic, drinking supply issues, and harvest periods. Farmers complain of slowing grain shipments and proper storage.
We rely on the Mississippi River a lot. Cotton now, not of course with the acres we have in cotton, it doesn't get shipped on the river. But now the acres we have in wheat and soybeans and sometimes corn, it all gets shipped on the river to the Gulf.
Despite the anticipation of rainfall to the river, some hydrologists believe it won't curtail the current water scarcity issue. They say the lower part of Mississippi River necessitates multiple rain-filled weeks to amend its water levels.
The river's crucial for everybody. That river is the main transporter of goods north and south. So if the river's low, everybody's gonna feel it. Not just us. We will feel it some, but we won't feel it like everybody else will. Nobody realizes how much fuel is transported up and down that river. Nobody realizes what all is moved up and down that little waterway. Now it's just dry.
Coming right up, U.S. budget gap soars to $1.7 trillion. Software companies NVIDIA and AMD plan to launch ARM PC chips by 2025. And find out the top stories to watch out for in the upcoming NBA season. Catch more news in business, tech, sports, and entertainment when we return.
Kwentuhang makaka-relate kay you.
Menopause. Meron ka bang nararamdaman ng mga signs ng menopause?
Menopause really happens. In my case, I had a condition called endometriosis.
Miss Corina, ganda po ng hair nyo. Ano pong shampoo nyo?
Mapa-senior man kay you.
My apos are here. They're here with me and they give me such joy. And so, kung hindi ako magtatrabaho, how could I spoil them?
O Gen Z?
Nar is actually an accent from Australia. So like when you say no, you don't say no. They say nar.
Bida kayo dito. Sumay!
Let's just always choose to be kind.
Kaya ugaliin ang tumutok kung saan masaya at maganda ang simula ng araw. 10 a.m. to 12, Lunes hanggang Biyernes, kada umaga.
Vietnam's first car maker VinFast is pushing to crack international electric vehicle markets from the United States to Germany. But at home, VinFast lacks domestic success. Catherine Urtula has the details.
Vietnam's first automaker, VinFast, wants to outsell Elon Musk's Tesla and plans to compete with the electric cars of the United States and Europe.
Today in Vietnam, you see VinFast vehicles everywhere. That's already a big step for a young company like us. But there's still a long way to go. But we believe that we have already created the momentum.
But analysts warn their struggle for domestic success could hamper VinFast's ambitions abroad. Backed by Vingroup, Vietnam's biggest conglomerate, VinFast has immense brand recognition in the country. Sources say Vietnamese users have always been urged to use Vietnam-made products. But VinFast finds it hard to convince drivers that its electric cars are reliable and high quality.
Cho nên chắc chắn là sẽ là một cuộc chơi dài hơi và gian nan đối với Vingroup. VinFast cũng là một trong những cái đơn vị đó thôi, tức là ai cũng vào cuộc chơi này cũng phải cần thời gian hết.
Based on the International Organization of Motor Vehicle Manufacturers, around 280,000 new passenger vehicles were sold in Vietnam in 2022. But VinFast has managed to sell only 7,400 units so far. Complaints about faulty construction and car software problems also plague the automaker's database.
Còn riêng về VinFast thì cũng là một hãng gọi là cũng còn mới trong cái lĩnh vực xe điện. Thì mình có tham gia nhiều hội nhóm thì thấy nhiều anh em cũng có góp ý là về lỗi hay bị gặp lỗi, mà ô tô thì ở Việt Nam mình thì nó còn tài sản rất là lớn, do vậy là việc mà để bỏ tiền mà mua một chiếc sản phẩm mà chưa hoàn thiện lắm thì có vẻ là không hợp lý.
Catherine Artula for mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The U.S. economy continues to remain resilient despite global geopolitical turmoil. The Biden administration, however, is now facing a near-record budget deficit. New York correspondent Bobby Soriano reports on the latest.
The latest deficit numbers are in, and they are definitely raising some eyebrows. According to the U.S. Treasury Department, the budget deficit reached $1.7 trillion at the end of September, the third largest deficit on record. On a year-to-year basis, the deficit increased by $320 billion for the fiscal year ending on September 30th. So why the growing deficit despite a strong, resilient U.S. economy? Well, the government's budget is no different than your household budget. To keep things balanced, spending needs to go down or income needs to go up. But the Biden administration is going in the opposite direction, having to face both increased spending and lower income for the year. Now, there has been a significant reduction in COVID-related spending since 2022, with much of the nation having already recovered from the pandemic. But government spending has increased in several other areas, with a $134 billion rise in Social Security expenses and a $162 billion increase in interest on the public debt. The net interest expense as a percentage of GDP is now at 2.5%, the highest level since 1998. President Biden has also requested aid to its allies throughout this year, with the most recent being a $106 billion national security package aimed at assisting Ukraine and Israel. On the flip side, income has decreased, with tax revenues having fallen to only 16.5% of U.S. GDP in 2023. The decrease in tax revenue is being primarily attributed to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act signed into law by the Trump administration in 2017. This fiscal situation could add pressure to President Biden's 2024 re-election campaign, with polls showing the economy as a central concern for most U.S. voters. It may also influence ongoing budget discussions in Congress, as the next deadline to address the budget and prevent a government shutdown is set for November 17th. In New York, Bobby Soriano for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Software companies NVIDIA and AMD are planning to launch their own ARM PC chips as soon as the year 2025. An ARM processor is a central processing unit, or CPU, that runs the computer's operating system. For now, Microsoft has so far exclusively partnered with Qualcomm for ARM-based versions of Windows 11. Tech sources said Microsoft is also working on its own ARM-based chips for servers. AMD and NVIDIA, however, are possibly joining Qualcomm for ARM-based Windows devices.
As the new NBA season begins tomorrow, here are some top storylines to watch out for the 2023 to 2024 season. Vin Pascua will tell us more.
Probably one of the biggest names to watch this NBA season is Victor Wembanyama. The San Antonio Spurs aims to quickly get back among the contenders in the Western Conference by drafting Wembanyama as their #1 overall pick this year. Being one of the most impressive players in the preseason, it's time to see if the 19-year-old 7 foot 4 inches Wemby can carry that over into the regular season. Next up is the Los Angeles Lakers, with LeBron James entering the new season as the oldest player at the age of 39. After a mid-season revamp ended with a trip to the Western Conference Finals, the Lakers are hoping a full season of success lies ahead. LeBron will enter his 21st season in the NBA with star Anthony Davis and a few key additions from the offseason to make them a championship-level contender once again. To what was supposed to be a strong title defense season, the Golden State Warriors are looking to regroup after an elimination from the playoffs in the second round. It was a successful regroup, however, with a splashy move from a veteran point guard Chris Paul. With the Warriors keeping their crew together for another year with Steph, Klay, and Draymond Green, can they do it one more time to bring home championship banner number 5 to the Bay Area? Meanwhile, a new coach and another star is in orbit as Phoenix Suns chase championship. The Suns add coach Frank Vogel and Bradley Beal in off-season attempt to find a better fit next to Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. While Phoenix will be a favorite to win the 2024 NBA championship on paper, they have a lot of proving to do alongside with their own big three. Perhaps the biggest story for the NBA this season, let's see what the Dame time could bring in Milwaukee. The Milwaukee Bucks made big headlines late in the summer when they made the blockbuster trade for star guard Damian Lillard. The fans in the Brew City are hoping the Dame-Giannis combo will be enough to net the Bucks franchise another world title. And can the defending champions Denver Nuggets repeat? Denver emerged as the top team in the league last year as they won their first NBA championship. In an improved Western Conference, the Nuggets will have a tall task ahead of repeating as NBA champions, with Denver remains stacked and has Nikola Jokic at the helm. Reporting for sports, Vin Pascua for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
And for your Tuesday takeaway, here's a quote from American writer and journalist Joan Didion. To free us from the expectations of others, to give us back to ourselves, there lies the great singular power of self-respect.
I've actually been thinking about this a lot because I remember years ago when I was a little bit younger, I would really value other people's opinions of me. And as much as I try to break away from that, I really couldn't. And I think it just comes with experience, with growth, and eventually that self-acceptance.
I think that kind of comes with being very young.
Yes.
And as you get older, the pressure is less and less.
Yes.
And I feel kind of bad for people who fall victim to listening to what social media dictates and what people want them to be. And in the end, they are so pressured and they lose respect for themselves.
I think that could be a message, especially for our younger viewers, right? Start to learn to value yourself and love every part of you.
Definitely.
And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am Gianna Llanes.
I am Nina Richie Alagao-Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Thank you for choosing Mata ng Agila International, your trusted news source, connecting you to the world and on point with stories from around the globe. Follow, like, and subscribe to @Net25 TV.